you can take and then play the move queen to h4, and look at how much you're dominating from this e6 b6 setup. If they were to take, rook takes f1 is checkmate. What's up everybody? Today I'm super excited to go over the e6 b6 setup for black. Now you can play this against anything, so they can start with e4 and then play d4, or they can start with d4 and then play c4, but regardless you end up with b6 and e6. Now, after they play e4 and take full control in the center, it might seem like you're much worse here because, well, they have full control in the center and you don't really have any control. However, as you will see throughout this video, there are many methods that you can utilize to take back control in the center. Things like bishop to b7, pressuring the center, things like bishop to b4, pinning the knight that would defend the center, things like f5, which becomes super powerful when your bishop is on b7 along this diagonal. Things like d5 and c5 are also always ideas because those spots are very heavily defended in this opening. So you'll see throughout this video many methods that you can use that will allow you to take control in the center and land in really good positions. Now here on move 3, you're going to play bishop to b7. You're almost always going to play bishop to b7, pressuring the center. And already, white has to make a choice on how to defend. They might go for this move knight to c3. I mean, it seems very natural. You're, of course, simply defending the pawn. But then you continue bishop to b4, and you pin this knight. And what you will notice in this opening is that every development comes with a purpose. There are many openings where you simply develop for the sake of developing. You don't really develop with an eye towards anything specific. But here, every move that you do, its goal is to pressure the center. And so the move bishop to b7 directly attacks the center. Bishop to b4 takes away a defender. And so everything you do will have an eye towards the center. Now here, they have a choice to make. They can play bishop to d3, for example, to defend this pawn again because, of course, the knight is pinned. But then you can immediately strike with f5. And the thing you notice is, well, your bishop is being opened up. If they were to push the pawn or if they were to take, regardless, this bishop opens up along this diagonal. Now you still have to be a bit careful because they can counterattack with queen to h5. This is still much better for you, but you still have to be quite cautious. You don't want to play a move like g6 here or king to e7, but the simple king to f8 here is, a beautiful idea, and you're completely winning here. You're going to win material, and even after you win material, you're going to be able to have a really nice position. So, for example, knight to h3, you can go knight to f6, attacking the queen. Then you can win a full rook, and then you can develop your knight. You can attack the queen, bring back your bishop towards the center, and centralize it. And now, I mean, there's all sorts of threats here. You're just completely crushing, and you, I mean, this is a beautiful position to be in. And so you can see here that you very quickly gained a huge advantage because of this move f5. And that is why sometimes you want to delay moving your knight to f6, because then you can play f5 later on. And very often you actually want to move your knight to e7 when you develop it, because then you can help support f5, and then you could also castle and you land in a really nice position. Now, they very often will hold back on developing this bishop because of the fact that otherwise your bishop could become very strong. So here, for example, they might play f3 to defend the pawn and try to kind of blunt your bishop. But this really doesn't do much, because in this position you can continue with knight to e7. Again, instead of going to f6, you want to keep this f-pawn cleared with the ability of playing f5 later on. Now let's say they continue bishop e3, for example, you castle, they go knight e2, and suddenly f5 comes. And you'll notice very often one of the key features of this position is that you have very nice pawn moves that you can do. f5 is very often defended by your pawns, sometimes by your rook and knight. This d5 move, again, by your knight, very often your bishop and your pawn. This c5 move by your bishop and pawn. Every one of these moves you have an ability to play it very early on. And very often you're going to do a mix of, one, two, or even all of these moves in order to take control of the game. So for example, f5 here, the bishop moves, and then c5. Let's take more control in the center. And later on you could even go d5. The end result is that you have full control in the center, and well, look at white's pawn, they're completely missing. And so here you're completely crushing, let's say queen to c2, trying to get ready maybe to castle, but then it's too late. d4 comes, knight to e3 comes, you're attacking the queen, bishop to d5 comes. One thing I will point out, if you do end up playing f5, your king does become weak along this diagonal. So just kind of as a general rule of thumb, if you have a move that you don't really know what to do, it might be a good idea to play king h8 at some point. So, there's never going to be forks. Here you don't need to worry because you can play bishop d5, but it might be helpful to play king h8 in some positions if you play f5. Now, the queen's attacked again, and then the queen's attacked again with c4. If they were to take the pawn, then there's a fork on c2. And if they were to go queen to d2, well, you have such a nice position here. You can take and then play the move queen to h4, and look at how much you're dominating from this e6, b6 setup. If they were to take, rook takes f1 is checkmate. And so you can see, and of course if they don't take, g3, you take the rook, and well, it's game over here. So very quickly, because of the fact that you get control in the center with all of your pieces, but also all of your pawns here that you can push, you can see that you end up in these wonderful positions where, all of your moves are natural. You're simply pushing your pawns, expanding, while your king is safe and their king is not. Now, this, of course, will not always happen. And if we move backwards, let's suppose that instead of playing knight to c3, they play d5. Sometimes their idea is, it might be hard to hold the pawns like these, so let's just continue expanding. But the truth is, sometimes it's even harder to hold pawns like these, and you can continue by giving a check, bishop to b4. They develop, let's say, their knight to c3 to block it, and then you can continue knight f6. Now here, you don't really need to save the move f5. Why? Because your bishop is already kind of, it doesn't have as open of a diagonal. They could even play f3. So f5 might not be as useful, so you can go knight f6, which might be more useful because you're attacking e4 directly. So you can also be flexible here. Sometimes if f5 is something you want to do, for example, in that position where we played knight to e7, we castled, and then played f5, you can play knight to e7, but otherwise you can play knight to f6. Now, if they were to take here, you can continue f takes e6, for example. Let's say they play f3 to defend, you can castle, then you can play d4, d5, again, continuing to attack in the center, and you'll see, these pawn moves are so natural, and almost always they're going to work because of the way your pieces work with your pawns here. The way that your pieces develop end up working really nicely when it comes to supporting these d5, c5, and f5 pawn pushes. So for example, c takes, let's say e takes, and now knight takes d5, and I mean, you can just see, again, the king is in the center. You can play rook to e8 at some point. There's pressure on the knight here. Your queen is wide open. Their knight, it's very awkward for white to develop here, and you have a super powerful bishop. And so, going back here, as long as you remember the main principles of developing with an eye towards the center, developing your bishop to pressure the center, to take away a defender in the center, and then to attack with f5, d5, and c5. Those are really basically the only things you need for most of your games in these openings, because it's just so natural to play like this, and you end off with really strong positions. Thank you guys for watching this video. For more videos like these, subscribe, like this video if you enjoyed it, and I'll see you guys next time. Peace out.